Hey, Andrew Masters here. Welcome back to another episode of Studio Time. Today we're going to be talking about the best way to use headphone mixers in a home studio. So we're going to be taking a look at the Behringer P16 headphone system. I'm going to use it as the example since that's what we're using on my home studio here. Essentially, it is a 16-channel mixer you can use for headphone routing in your studio. The reason you would use a system like this is because you can sort of offload attention on what the player or musician is hearing to them so that they can customize exactly what they want to hear themselves, and you don't have to do that for them. This is gonna be one of the more affordable systems to get. It's also fairly simple to use. First off, it is power over Ethernet. So to connect each mixer, you just use an Ethernet cable, and that provides power to the mixer and all 16 channels of input for the headphone routing. Now, as I said, I don't want to get too into the P16s because this isn't necessarily a P16 video, but it is cool that you can link group channels on here. You can actually store like your whole headphone setup to the box and recall it, which is pretty helpful once you get things set up and you kind of just want to go back to your default settings. Each mixer has its own EQ for the whole box. You've got your output control, and then you have individual fader level and mute for each channel that you have on your input, as well as a pan. So you can do some panning, or again, you can link channels and create stereo groups. Now, I haven't always used headphone mixers in my home studio. There was a couple years where I chose to just use a Q box, even when I had these. A Q box is just default stereo headphones. Like, you would get out of your interface, you plug your headphones in, and you've got your headphone level. I basically had that just sending to multiple boxes, and we all heard the same stereo mix. And in some sense, that simplified things, but where it got tricky is when you are working with multiple performers and they want to hear different stuff, which can get a little distracting and tends to slow things down a little bit. So here's what I'm doing now in my studio using my new interface setup with these headphone mixers. Now, the Galaxy 32 has a bunch of different ways to utilize inputs and outputs. And one of them is it has 8 channels of ADAT, in addition to the 32 channels of analog I/O. So for this headphone mixer, the first 8 channels coming in are ADAT inputs. And then the second 8 channels coming in are analog inputs. Those are 1/4-inch TRS inputs, plugs on the back of the input module for this system. So that's how we're getting into the system. Again, it's 8 ADAT inputs and 8 analog inputs with TRS connections. So I'm going to show you exactly how I route the input signals to these headphone boxes so that everyone can have direct monitoring of their input. But first I want to show you exactly what is on these headphone mixers. That tends to work for pretty much every session that we've done in here. So the first 2 channels on this box, if I get my face out of the way, here, I'll unplug it so you can see. The first 2 channels on the box are the mix returns. So this is going to be anything that has been recorded in the DAW that is playing back. After our playback channels, these are all live input channels. So these are stereo channels for drum inputs. So all of the drum mics are mixed on their own submix, balanced in a way that I like to hear it when I'm drumming. But essentially all those mics are being submixed down into 2 channels right here. So the drummer and any other musicians who are using the headphone boxes can just click here and turn the drums up or down. After the drums, we have the inputs for the keys. After keys, we have guitar, vocals, talkback, click, and then these I almost never used, but channel 11 is bass, and we clearly have another 5 channels available if we need them. Sometimes we'll do effects returns for if someone's doing vocals and they want to hear some reverb or some delay or something like that. Those can come in on effects channels at the end of the box. But for the majority of sessions that we do in this studio, this is pretty much set and forget. These levels are all easily adjustable on this headphone mixer. You've got your playbacks, and then you've got all of your inputs. And because the Galaxy saves your software settings as hardware presets, you actually don't even need the computer once it's set and saved on the device of the interface. You just, as long as the interface is on and it's connected to the headphone system, we're going to be able to hear those inputs even if the computer's off, which is way more fun, way more creative, allows for a lot of creativity in the studio when I don't have to open something up, create tracks, and do that whole thing. We can just touch things and hear it. It's great. So that's everything that I put on the headphone mixers. Next, I'm going to show you how I do all the routing for these inputs and outputs to the headphone box on the computer. Okay, so to show you the way I have all of our audio routed to the headphone mixers, I'm going to open up what's called the control panel to my interface. This is the software that comes with the interface that allows me to route signal anywhere I want. So if you're not familiar with this, I'll just give you a very quick lay of the land. This is our main routing window here. This is our input section. This allows you to show and hide all of your potential inputs to your interface. Underneath it, you have your output window, which same thing allows you to show and hide any potential connections you have for outputs. In this next tab, we have our internal digital mixers. This is a huge selling point for using the routing with these headphone mixers and monitoring, as well as taking advantage of building a control room mix. Essentially, with the interface, you get, on this corner, you can see you have 4 different digital mixers that you can send anything you want to, and you can mix them however you want. And then you can take the output of the whole entire mix stereo and send that anywhere you want. So I'll come back to how I use those mixers in a second. This software allows the interface to essentially act as an internal digital patch bay, allowing you to patch signals multiple times to as many different places. Let's start off on getting signal to the first 8 channels of my headphone mixer. So I'm using ADAT for input channels 1 through 8 on my P16 headphone mixers. So in order to get the channels to go to ADAT output 1 through 8, I pick what I want to be my source to go there, right? So my output tab here, you can see we have ADAT out 1 through 8 here. These numbers are different because these are actually the sources going to these outputs. So if I select DAW out 1, 2, you can see it's mirrored, showing every single place that DAW out 1 and 2 are being routed. So you can route this as many times to as many different places as you want. It does not matter. I'm sending my DAW output 1 and 2 to ADAT out 1 and 2. So anything that plays back from within a session or even just on my computer in general is showing up on our headphone mixer on channels 1 and 2. Now 3 and 4, this is the cool one. So the 3 and 4 on the headphone mixer are our drum microphone inputs. So you can see here, mix 3 out is showing up to ADAT out 3 and 4. So ADAT 3 and 4 output is the output of mixer 3. So if we go back to our mixer tab here, you can see you can create submixes here. This is what I was talking about before, where you can actually build out a whole mix of all the drum mics, which is exactly what I've done here. So channels 3 through 15 are my drum mics. So I've got, kick in, kick out, snare top, bottom, toms, overheads, hat, ride, rooms, and mono drum kit right here. So this is my drum input blend. So all of those mics show up here and I can blend them. Some of them are paired in stereo, so I can raise overheads or rooms easily. by grabbing one fader. But I can take the output of this whole mix, this whole submix of the drums, since it's on mixer 3, I can grab mixer 3 out and just drag it to ADAT out 3 and 4. So now I've got DAW out 1 and 2 and my drum inputs out ADAT 3 and 4. So when I sit down at that drum set and I play, I can hear it right away. It's amazing. And you can just repeat this process with whatever you want. So I've got a synth connected here. You can see it's coming in on mixer 1 on channels 19 and 20. So my inputs for my keyboard are on 19, 20. So I go to my input section, I grab 19 and 20, and I can see that it's routed to mixer 1, but I want it to go to my cue box. So I'm gonna drag it down to come out of keys 5 and 6. So now my synth is showing up on 5 and 6 on my headphone box. Just like that, I touch a key and I can see signal on the headphone box. Here, I'll hold it up so you can see it as well. So that's how I do the routing for the ADAT sends for channels 1 through 8 on the headphone box. Now for channels 9 through 16, I'm using analog outputs. So I would essentially do the exact same process, but instead of sending them to my ADAT 1 through out, I would drag whatever I want to be my sends, let's say 17 or 18, we'll grab 17. I would just send this to a line out. So for the analog outputs, you do the exact same process, but instead of dragging your source to your ADAT output sends, you would drag it to your line outputs. And in my case, I have the 32 channels of analog outputs, then I have another 32 that is connected via MADI. So these are essentially analog outputs 33 through 64. So I can drag any source I want and use any of these outputs and patch them to the analog inputs of the headphone mixer. Now outside of the ADAT and the analog outs from my interface, I have another connection that I'm using, which is my talkback in my control room. Now I'm using the Grace M905 monitor controller, which has a talkback trigger on the remote control. Take a drink every time I say control. The module back here for the M905 has a line level output for the talkback, and I'm just patching analog out of that into the analog input of the channel that talkback is on, and that just stays there all the time, channel 9. So no matter which headphone box you're at, you can hear my control room talkback in your headphones. All right, so a bonus section of this, we've pretty much covered all of our bases as far as routing to this headphone box, but the very next level to doing this would be setting up talkbacks for the individual musicians who are playing. If you have them in different rooms like I have, then it's gonna be really helpful to have a talkback mic for them to communicate with you. Now, I have done a video on setting up talkbacks on this channel. You can watch that. I'll link it in the description if you want to check that out. The way that we have it set up here is there's a microphone next to the player, and then there's a foot switch that essentially acts as a mute for it. So when you press the button, it bypasses the mute and you can talk, and that signal hits a preamp, it comes into here, hits an input on the interface, and then I can hear them in the control room talking to me whenever they need to say something to communicate. So that's, you know, just a microphone, XLR to the little pedal, which acts as a mute, and then that does normal routing to get to the interface. But as I mentioned before, you can use these internal mixers as a submix. So if, let's say I had, I don't know, 5 different musicians in here and 5 different talkbacks, I don't want to chew up 5 different channels of the headphone box for those talkbacks. So what I would do is I would take one of these mixers and I would bring in all the talkbacks on that mixer, and then I would grab the output of that mixer and then route that to a channel on the headphone box. And that way, not only can I hear them in the control room when they need to communicate with me, but they can press on that button and not only talk to me, but talk to one another while they're in different rooms. So again, using these internal mixers for this interface to give you the flexibility of creating submixes and then taking the output of that submix and routing it anywhere you want, as many times as you want, just takes so much mental capacity off of me. Once it's all set up, you can save that preset. It just stays that way, and it makes the workflow so much easier. So I know a lot of you guys have asked me how I set up the routing in here. I hope this clarifies that for you. I'm trying to be as thorough as I can and make this as clear as possible, because it is really a game changer for the workflow in here to just be able to touch things, hear it immediately, have it go to the inputs for the DAW and the template, but also have it go to all the headphone boxes, have it come out of the speakers. It has just made this work so much more fun and interactive for everyone who's in here. And hopefully this was helpful for you. If you have any more questions, you're welcome to leave some comments down below the video. If you're setting up a studio for yourself and you want to have a more in-depth conversation, you can actually book a Zoom call on my website with me. It's one of the things that we have set up for the business. I even just went to a friend of mine's house and helped him set up his whole studio. He actually bought my console. He got the Antelope Audio 32. We basically recreated this setup for his studio so that he could just jump in on autopilot and create how I create. So if you're interested in learning more about that and you want to just talk directly with me, you can go to my website. There's a link to it down below. And of course, I wouldn't be able to do this video without our friends at Sweetwater, who are sponsoring this video. And it goes without saying, if you have any questions about any of the equipment that I'm using in this studio, particularly these headphone systems, the Behringer PowerPlay 16s, you can check the description for links to all of that equipment, as well as pretty much all of this incredible equipment here in the studio. Everything I use, you can get at Sweetwater. Outside of the Galaxy interface, pretty much everything we have and use here in the studio, you can get at Sweetwater. Big shout out to them for sponsoring this video. Check those links down in the description if you want to see more details on any of this. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.